Imagine you're sitting in a hospital waiting room. The neon lights cast a pale green glow, and the stiff plastic chairs creak softly whenever someone shifts. The faint smell of antiseptic hangs in the air, making the whole room feel frozen in a weary silence. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up with the name Angela, my daughter. My heart warmed for a moment, until I heard her voice, so cold it was unfamiliar. "Mom, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow. I've sold the beach house and your car. We need the money. Goodbye, Mom." Beep. The call ended in less than 2 minutes. 45 years of raising her, of sacrifice, and I was discarded like a worthless item. But strangely, I didn't cry. I took a deep breath and smiled faintly, because my daughter didn't know. Robert, my husband, had left me a secret that would change everything. The doctor's waiting room was the same. Beep. After harsh Angela fluorescent hung up, lights, still the smell of antiseptic, like a cold, the dry cough of an old man in the corner. But for me, the world had just completely changed. My only daughter, the little girl who once held my hand on her first day of school, who used to run into my arms sobbing after a fall, had just sold our home and her father's last memento, all in a single, cold phone call. I don't remember how long I sat on that hard plastic chair. I only remember every detail of the call. Her voice, distant, almost emotionless. Not a single question about my well-being, not a word of apology. Just an announcement, like someone paying a bill. 45 years. Every penny saved from my salary, every meal I skipped to provide for her, every dream my husband and I had was placed on Angela's small shoulders. They say a mother's love is endless. And now, but in that moment, I realized how much it could be trampled on, how little it could be valued. Yet the strange thing was, I didn't cry. Since the day Robert passed away, my tears had flowed countless times, as if trying to dissolve my very being. But today, when Angela cast me off with a dry farewell, I found my heart as still as a lake after a storm. I took a deep breath, listening to the beat of my own heart, and I smiled faintly. Because Angela had no idea that Robert, the man I loved all my life, was always prepared for the unforeseen. 3 days before his heart stopped on a peaceful morning, he had given me a yellow envelope, saying only one thing: "Open it when you're ready." I had put it away in an old drawer and forgotten it amidst the grief and emptiness. But today, my daughter's cruel rejection made me remember. And I knew it was time to open that envelope, and listened as he said my health was fine for my age. It sounded like an echo from far away. I just needed more rest. I smiled and thanked him, but my mind was already at home, where the yellow envelope was waiting. Leaving the hospital, I took the old bus home. Angela might have thought that without a car, I would be stuck. But looking through the window, watching the city flow by with its countless hurried lives, I felt a sense of lightness. Because I knew I had a secret, a truth no one had yet touched. As I stepped into the silent house, the late afternoon darkness draped over every familiar corner. I went straight to the bedroom, opened the drawer, and saw the envelope. Intact, as if Robert were still there, having placed it with his warm hands. I placed the envelope on the bed, my hands trembling. All the noises from outside faded away. The room was left with just me. The pain of my daughter's betrayal. I sat down on the bed, closed my eyes, and let the memories flood in. Robert, making morning coffee, placing a gentle kiss on my forehead, and his soft good morning. Angela's voice as a child, chattering about school. It all blended into a stream of memories, both sweet and painful. And I knew from this moment on, my life would take a different turn. Angela thought she had taken everything from me. But the truth was, she was about to face something she had never imagined. Her mother was not helpless. I placed my hand on the envelope and took a deep breath. Inside could be anything, but it was certainly the beginning of a new chapter. I placed the envelope in my palm, the thick, slightly rough paper feeling like an expired ticket waiting to be torn. The evening light had reached the threshold, dyeing the room in a deep amber hue. I could hear my own breathing. A sparrow flitted past the window, as if soothing a heart that had just been bruised of the purple by my sky. I pulled up a chair and sat on the edge of the bed. My fingers traced the sealed edge. Robert always sealed things so neatly, never with excess tape. Just enough, he used to say, to save the rest for the future. I touched the envelope to my lips, an old habit like a greeting, and then pulled the seal. The soft tearing sound was tiny, yet it sounded like a crack in the air. Inside was more than just paper. There was a smell, a scent of old paper, of ink, of a wooden cabinet, and a faint hint of coffee. Or was I imagining it? I pulled out stacks of documents, neatly clipped in hard covers. Property deeds, shareholder registers, bank certificates, along with another thinner envelope with Robert's neat, elegant handwriting. His handwriting hadn't changed. Decisive, Eleanor, calm, like a factory owner signing off on a plan before leaving the room. My Eleanor, if you are reading these lines, I am probably gone. I'm sorry for not telling you everything while I was still with you. But I wanted you to live in peace, not haunted by the numbers and decisions I took upon myself. I saved every penny from my years as a bus driver, every hour of overtime, every small bonus. I invested not to show off, but to give you, and Angela, if she learns to appreciate it, a very wide umbrella against the rain. The beach house is not our only asset. Below is a list of assets held by Robert Investments, Inc., a company I set up for legal tidiness and to avoid fuss. The ultimate owner, you. You will find the file for a 20-story apartment building downtown to be transferred to where you Angela should anything were to renting. A small apartment in the old town, a seaside motel, 2 rental houses in the western residential area, and a vacant lot near the park. This land will appreciate, I believe. In the green cover are shares in 3 companies: a local logistics company, a home furniture workshop, and an industrial cleaning service. Don't laugh. Cleaning services are always in demand. You will also find some certificates of deposit and savings accounts, not as large as the real estate, but flexible when needed. The reason I kept it a secret? Not because I doubted you. I was afraid if Angela knew too soon, she wouldn't learn the value of labor and restraint. I had hoped that one day, when she was mature, we would tell her. If she is not ready now, let time teach her in our place. His phone
There
number is in the
one
gray
person
folder.
you can trust.
Meet him when you feel calm
Mr.
enough.
Peterson,
Eleanor.
the lawyer who helped
If
me
you
arrange
feel
everything.
overwhelmed, just leave it all on the dining table like we used to do with crosswords on Sunday mornings. Solve one clue a day. Then you will see. Everything has its place. I love you. Robert. I folded the letter, my hand trembling slightly. Not because of the numbers, because of his voice. Crossing through the dry ink, through the absence and grief, returning as gently as on that last morning, he placed a cup of coffee beside me. I set the letter aside and opened the green folder. The asset list was presented as neatly as a lesson plan. Property name, address, legal status, monthly income, building manager, lease agreement, expiration date, an Excel sheet printed on paper with fine, straight lines. Robert was still Robert, quiet, steady, not a word wasted. My eyes stopped on one line. Robert
Aurora
Investments,
Apartments,
Inker
20
current
floors,
authorized
Angela
person,
and
Edward,
Eleanor
renting
Brooks.
unit 1203. A moment of silence. I knew that building. I had visited a few times to give them New Year's gifts. I had stood in the courtyard, looking up at the balcony with the bougainvillea that Edward boasted of planting. It turned out the entire building belonged to my husband's company. I, who had thought of myself my whole life as the housewife of a diligent bus driver, was holding the keys to the very place where my daughter had once told me, "Mom, just wait in the lobby, we're busy." A laugh escaped my throat. Not sour, not bitter. Just a little burst of surprise. Life sometimes hides its magic tricks right in the corner of your home. I turned to the gray folder. Just as the letter said, Mr. Peterson's business card was clipped inside. Was a summary of
with
the
a company
handwritten
structure,
note from
ownership
Robert
diagram,
in the corner. List of bank accounts.
He can be trusted.
Certificates of deposit. Each item noted with a plan AB, like retreat paths in a long game of chess. I arranged the papers into stacks on the bed. Real estate, accounts, shares, legal. Each stack had a different colored divider. Robert was so thoughtful that even the colors had meaning. Sea blue for properties, green for shares, pale yellow for savings, gray for legal. So you can tell the mood just by looking at the color when you open the folder, he once joked. Only now did I understand. Each color was a heartbeat of the future. I turned the envelope over. There was another small note, only half the size of my hand. If someone, even Angela, sells something that isn't theirs, don't be angry just yet. The law will be on our side when the papers are on the side of the truth. Just gently, the wall clock's hand crept past 7. I sat for a long time on the porch, listening to the wind rustled through the rosemary bush. On the wall, the picture of us when we were young was still smiling. Perhaps never in many months had the house been so peaceful. A peace that didn't deny the pain, but placed it on its proper shelf. The phone vibrated once. A text from the bank. Account balance has received funds. I remembered the 30% Angela said was Mom's share, an amount that, looking at it now, was as tiny as a drop of water on a large stone. I opened the app, looking at the cold flow of money. It wasn't greed that made me find it ridiculous, but the sudden understanding that my daughter had sold her own memories for cheap. The beach house, where Robert taught her to tie a fishing line, the car, where the smell of the sea breeze clung to the seat belts, all reduced to a number.
I put the phone down.
The first clue, I knew what it was.
Wasn't the time for anger.
Call Mr. Peterson.
Robert had advised.
I stood up,
Solve one clue
went to the kitchen
a
to
day.
boil water, and made a pot of black tea. The water simmered. I poured the tea into a white porcelain cup, the steam fogging the glass window. These small acts, measuring water, turning on the stove, waiting for it to boil, suddenly became a ritual that helped me transition from the abandoned to the one about to take the wheel. I poured a cup for Robert, placing it next to the letter, as if he were sitting opposite me, waiting for my nod. "Robert," I said softly. "All right." I dialed the number on the business card. It rang twice. A warm, clear, middle-aged male voice answered. "Peterson Law Office, speaking." "Hello, this is Eleanor Brooks, Robert's wife. I found the envelope he mentioned. I need an appointment, as soon as possible." There was a short silence on the other end, as if someone standing at attention morning from 9
before a familiar
"You
name.
can come anytime. Mrs. Brooks,
Mr. Robert
my
left
belated
instructions.
condolences. I will prepare the files." I hung up, feeling something inside me realigning, like a messy bookshelf having its books put back in their proper places. The pain didn't disappear. It changed its role, from perpetrator to witness. I took a sip of tea, the bitter taste touching my tongue, then a sweetness spreading down my throat. I gathered the documents into a briefcase with a snap lock and placed it by the door. Coat, keys, notebook, all neatly ready for the morning. Before turning off the lights, I stopped by the living room and stood before the largest photo. Me and Robert on a sunny day, our eyes squinted from smiling. I touched his face in the photo, my hand feeling the cool glass. "I'll listen to you. I won't let anger steer. I will let the law." I didn't turn on the living room light, and time, letting the darkness pass like a gentle river. She needs to learn. On the porch, night fell. A sea breeze from memory blew in, softly. I lay down, the briefcase of files placed on the chair by my head, like a good cat guarding my sleep. It had been a long time since my eyelids felt heavy in such a safe way. Not from exhaustion, but from peace of mind. Before drifting off to sleep, I made myself a promise. Tomorrow morning, when the door of that law office opens, I will walk through it as a different person. No longer the mother whose house was sold with a 2-minute phone call, but a guardian of a legacy, coming to reclaim what belongs to love and justice. Not with a fuss, not with revenge, just putting everything back in its place. In the corner of the room, the envelope for Eleanor lay still, its job done. Not to flaunt wealth, I just had to light a lamp in the night, step by step, with all the dignity that life was designed by someone long ago. Had taught me. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Peterson's office with the briefcase in my hand. The glass door swiveled gently, releasing the scent of polished wood and old paper, reminding me of the days when Robert was still alive, when we went to sign the contract for our first house. Everything had a certain solemnity, like entering a miniature courtroom where justice didn't need a gavel, but was silently hidden in the signed lines. Peterson stood up to greet me, tall, with silver hair and sharp but gentle eyes. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Brooks, we finally meet. Robert was right. You would come to me when you were ready." I sat down in the leather chair. It let out a soft, neat creak, like a full stop. I opened the briefcase and pushed the stack of documents toward him.
Robert
Mr.
was
Peterson
brilliant.
glanced at them briefly.
He planned every
and
detail
nodded,
meticulously.
as if he had been
Do you
familiar
know what
with
you're
them
holding
for
in
a
your
long
hands?
time.
I shook my head. I just know it's more than I ever imagined. He opened a file, his voice even and firm. You don't just have the beach house. You are now the legal owner of 6 properties scattered across the city and the coast. One of them is the very apartment building where your daughter lives. There are also shares in 3 profitable companies and a cash amount in accounts so large, it's hard to believe it was saved up by a bus driver. I smiled softly and shook my head. Robert always surprised me, even when he's gone. Peterson paused, his eyes showing a hint of sympathy. Do you understand the significance of this? Angela had no legal right to sell the house or the car. They all belong to you. If you want, we can file a lawsuit immediately, void the transaction, and get
Angela's
everything
voice
back. Echoed in my head.
I fell silent.
I've sold the house
my
and
fingers
your car.
gently tracing the cold
Goodbye,
wooden
Mom.
tabletop.
I could get everything back, but if I did, my daughter would only learn that a rich mother could buy back her mistakes. She would never fully grasp the price of betrayal. I looked up, my voice low but firm. No, I don't want to sue. I want to do it differently. Please keep this quiet. Help me recover the assets, but don't let anyone know. I want Angela to face the consequences of her actions first. Peterson looked at me, longer than usual, then nodded. I understand. A lesson doesn't always come from a courtroom. Leaving the office, I stood in the middle of the bustling city, where people rushed past. They had no idea that the silver-haired woman with a briefcase had just emerged from a massive secret. To them, I was just an ordinary, perhaps sitting by the window. I watched the buildings go by, and I liked that misunderstanding. Some of which were now mine, places I had never known. Home. It was ironic. Angela thought I was penniless. In reality, I was richer than ever. That afternoon, I reopened the documents, this time reading every line carefully. In the appendix, Robert had left a summary of revenues. Every rented apartment, every dividend was listed. I was almost overwhelmed. It wasn't just assets. It was an entire safety net that Robert had quietly built. So his wife would never have to fear that the day he was gone would be the end of her life. Tears rolled down my face, but they were no longer bitter. They were tears of gratitude. In the evening, I sat in the kitchen, a hot cup of tea in my hand, looking at my reflection in the window. I thought about Angela. The girl believed she had stripped everything from me. But she didn't know that she herself had been stripped of the chance to prove a child's love
I was
and
just
loyalty.
a poor old mother.
A plan
I would let her
sparked
free
in my
fall
mind.
until she truly understood what loss meant. And when she hit rock bottom, then I would extend my hand. Not to forgive immediately, but to teach her that love cannot be bought with money, and betrayal always has its price. I looked out at the porch, where darkness was slowly swallowing the garden. In the dark, I saw Robert's silhouette, leaning against the wooden fence, smiling. I whispered, "My dear, I will do it my way. Not for revenge, but for our child to learn the lesson you always wanted her to understand. The wind slipped through the crack in the door like an answer. I closed the file and put it in the drawer. Tomorrow, I would begin a new game of chess where I held all the strongest pieces, but
For the first time in months, I dreamt of Robert. Not at his funeral,
That night,
not in the hospital,
I slept peacefully.
but in our sunlit kitchen, a hot cup of coffee in his hand. He looked at me, his eyes full of trust, and said, "Eleanor, it's time for you to stand up." The next morning, I left the house with a small leather briefcase, carefully placing inside the documents Peterson had reviewed the day before. It was early autumn. The sunlight had softened, and the sidewalk was dappled with the shadows of yellow leaves. People often say autumn is sad, but to me, that day it felt like a reminder. Everything has its season to fall, to make way for new green shoots. The bus took me downtown. I sat by the window, quietly observing the unfamiliar faces. A young mother soothing her child, a worker dozing off, a few students giggling. They had no idea that in this corner of a plastic seat sat a 71-year-old woman holding a secret big enough to change a family's destiny.
Peterson's office was brightly
And I
lit,
had no
the air
desire for
fragrant
anyone
with
to
freshly
know.
brewed coffee. He greeted me with a warm handshake. "Mrs. Brooks, I've reviewed everything again. All assets, shares, and cash belong to you. Robert did a very clean job. The only issue now is how we handle Angela's unauthorized sale of the house and car." I sat down, took a sip of the tea his secretary had just brought, and said calmly, "Mr. Peterson, I don't want to sue. I don't want to go public. I want to get everything back, but in a way that Angela has no idea I'm behind it." He frowned. "You want to keep a secret from your own daughter?" I nodded. "If I go public, she will only see the money. If I remain silent, she will see herself." Mr. Peterson sat quietly for a few seconds, then sighed. "You're more like Robert than I thought. He also used to say, undoing the sale of the beach
justice
house was
doesn't always come
straightforward,
from a courtroom.
since Angela had no legal
We began to
right,
formulate the
making
plan.
the sale void. The buyer would be refunded from a contingency fund, and the house would return to my ownership. Robert's Ford truck was more complicated because Angela had tricked me into signing a power of attorney. Peterson suggested filing a case to prove a mistake due to post-bereavement psychological state. I agreed because at that time, I was truly just a shadow of myself. The apartment building where Angela lived had legally always been mine. The necessary step was to transfer direct management from the company to me, so that when needed, I could make the final decision. For each point, Peterson took careful notes, his voice steady and calm, as if reading a slow piece of music. I just sat there, nodding, occasionally adding a small detail. Everything was arranged neatly. The sky
Like
had turned
silent
purple,
chess
pieces,
the wind
moving toward
colder.
the center of the board.
I went into the
That
kitchen,
afternoon,
lit the
I
stove,
returned home.
and put on a kettle. While waiting for the water to boil, I made another phone call. Not to Peterson, but to Aurora, the neighbor who had lived next to me for over 30 years. "Eleanor, are you all right?" Her voice was full of concern. "I'm fine, but you might see me out more often in the next few weeks. Don't say anything to Angela if she asks. Just say I'm going to the doctor, to the market. Whatever reason you think is plausible. Aurora hesitated. That child. Has she done something again? I laughed softly. Some things, Aurora, she has to experience for herself. I just need you to keep it quiet. Aurora sighed, but agreed. She had always trusted me since we were young. In the following days, I lived a double life. In the morning, I was the old widow the neighbors
People
pitied.
looked at me with a mix of pity
I went to the
and
market,
curiosity.
bought some vegetables.
Is Angela
and
really in
talked to
Europe?
neighbors with a tired
How could she
smile.
leave you all alone?
I just smiled, shook my head, and offered no explanation. In the afternoon, I was a different person. I sat in my kitchen, spreading out files on the table, noting down every task Peterson sent. I reread the asset list, underlining items that needed immediate attention. I made calls, sent faxes, quietly reclaiming every piece of my life my daughter thought was gone. The feeling was strange, as if I were living in a play, and every day was a new scene. In front of everyone, I played the part of the pitiful mother. Behind closed doors, I became the master of a fortune. And most importantly, Angela had no idea. Meanwhile, from the fragmented bits of news I received
People
through
saw them
acquaintances,
selling off furniture.
Angela and Edward
carrying large
were still
suitcases to a
busy
taxi,
preparing for their trip
whispering
to Europe.
about
investment opportunities over there. One afternoon, passing by a grocery store, I overheard two young women talking. That couple from the Aurora apartments, I think they sold their old truck too. The husband said he's going to do big business in France. Wow, they look like they've struck it rich. I smiled to myself. Struck it rich? If they knew the truth, they would probably laugh at them instead. But I didn't correct them. I let the rumors drift away like fallen leaves because I knew time would clear everything up on its own. One evening, Angela called. Her voice was completely different from the last time. Sweet, even a bit rushed. Mom, I just wanted to let you know. We're about to fly. I've transferred some money into your account. 30%. I think that's fair. I listened, each word
Please
like
take
a
care of
knife
your
cut
health.
to my heart. When we
But
get
my
back,
voice
we'll
remained
help you find a
calm.
smaller, more suitable
Okay,
apartment.
thank you.
Have a safe trip. She chuckled softly. I knew you'd understand. You're always so generous. Goodbye, Mom. Beep. The call ended. I put the phone down on the table, then burst out laughing. The laughter echoed softly in the dark kitchen, mixed with the bitter taste of tea. She thought she had given me a part of my own property. She thought I was weak, in need of a tiny apartment to live in. She didn't know that just a few words in a file had made me the legal owner of the entire building she used to live in. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Stay silent. Let the truth teach its own lesson." Peterson called later with an update. The process to void the sale of the beach house is underway. The truck will take more time, but I believe it will be fine. What do you want
Let her
me to
think
do
I'm
with
living
the
off that money.
Angela just
It will be useful for our
deposited
little
into your
play.
account? I smiled
Night
over the
fell.
phone. I sat in
it.
my old armchair, watching the streetlights cast a glow on the window. I had a strange feeling inside, a mix of pain, serenity, and the thrill of playing a game I was sure to win. Robert used to say, chess is not just about winning, but about teaching the opponent how to lose. And I understood. This game of chess was not aimed at defeating Angela, but at showing her that losing isn't about losing money, but about losing love, losing respect. As Angela and Edward laughed on their flight to Europe, I knew the invisible thread between mother and child was still there, but it was being stretched to its limit. One day, it would snap back, pulling Angela back. And when it did, I would be ready, with the lesson she needed most in her life. The plane took off, and Angela rested her head
closed her
on
eyes,
Edward's shoulder, imagining a future
Outside,
full of sunny
white
days.
clouds
Were layered,
glamorous
like vast
Paris,
cotton fields,
ancient
Rome, luxurious restaurants, and investment contract signings. In her mind, the image of her old mother was just a faint shadow in the background, associated with the old house and the truck that had been sold. "We're starting a new chapter, my love," Edward whispered. Angela believed him so much she didn't have a shred of doubt. The first few days in Paris were like a dream. Edward rented a small apartment near Gare de Lyon with a balcony overlooking a cobblestone street. They drank cheap wine that tasted like champagne to Angela. Edward talked a lot about a big opportunity, a restaurant and bar project for young international crowds. He drew on paper, describing streams of tourists and huge profits. Angela listened intently, believing the euros in her wallet, the
were
money
about
in
to
their
multiply
account, dwindled
tenfold.
quickly. But after just a few
food,
weeks, the first shadow appeared. Paris was not an easy city for newcomers. Edward always reassured her, "We just need a little more capital. Once the restaurant opens, everything will fall into place." Angela nodded, telling herself that her mother back home was probably fine, and that the decision to sell the house and car was the right one. One evening, Edward came home late, smelling strongly of alcohol. He threw a messy pile of papers on the table, contracts in French with scribbled signatures. "We're about to get in the game, Angela, but we need a 50,000 euro deposit." Angela was stunned. "We don't have that much left." Edward squeezed her hand, his eyes like steel. "Trust me. This is a life-changing opportunity. You can call the bank, transfer the rest. In just a few months, you'll see the money pouring in." They started falling behind on rent, but she listened. The landlord knocked on their door constantly. The next 2 months, the restaurant never Angela's grocery shopping became more and more frugal, their meals reduced to bread and cheap cheese. One morning, Angela discovered her bank card had been completely drained. Edward vaguely explained, "I needed to pay off a temporary debt. Don't worry. Money is coming soon." Angela trembled, her heart pounding. For the first time, she realized she knew nothing about Edward's finances. She only knew how to trust, how to sign, how to follow. The breaking point came on a rainy night. Angela woke up to cold sheets. Edward was gone. A note was left on the table. "I have to go take care of some urgent business. Don't look for me. I'll be back when it's done. Love you." Angela waited. 1 day, 2 days, then a week. Edward did not return. Angela, his phone was dragged
off.
her suitcase
His
onto the
emails
street,
went unanswered.
the rain soaking her
The
hair.
apartment
was locked due to unpaid rent. The city of dreams had suddenly become a cold labyrinth. She went to the bank only to discover a series of loans in her name. Edward had used forged signatures and fake documents, turning her into a debtor. The number on the screen stared back at her. over 100,000 euros. Angela felt like she was falling into an abyss. Everything was spinning. What do I do? Mom. For the first time in months, her mother's image appeared in her mind, but not to call for comfort. Angela knew she had cut that cord. She had pushed herself away, and now there was no one to hold on to. The following days were a long free fall. Angela slept on the couch of an old college friend, a French girl who had warned her, "Edward is not trustworthy." But Angela had ignored her. She applied for a job at a cafe. Now she had to endure the sarcastic made the owner hesitate. "I told you so." Her clumsy French further diminished her slim chances. In the evenings, she wandered along the Seine, watching couples hold hands. Her heart was empty. She had only a few euros left in her pocket. One day, she saw Edward in a smoky bar, his arm around a young blonde girl in a short dress. Edward saw Angela, froze for a few seconds, then turned away as if he had never known her. Angela rushed at him, screaming, but the bar staff dragged her out. The Parisian rain was pouring. She sat on the wet sidewalk, soaked to the bone, her heart shattered. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to be utterly betrayed. And the memory of her mother came back like a slap in the face. She remembered her gentle voice, the meals her mother cooked, the times her mother waited for her at the school gate. Angela
Everything
broke
she
down,
had sold cheaply,
but life hadn't
looked
hit
down
rock bottom
upon.
yet.
Now
A letter from the
became
bank
only
arrived.
Anchor in her mind.
They would sue if the debt was not paid. Black ink on white paper, stamped in red. Cold, emotionless. She trembled as she picked up her phone. Her mother's number lit up in her contacts. Her finger hovered over the call button. But then she stopped. What did I say to her? "We sold the house and the car. Goodbye, Mom." How can I have the face to call her back? Angela put down the phone, burying her face in her trembling hands. Tears streamed down endlessly. That night, she dreamed. In her dream, she was a 10-year-old girl again, sitting in the beach house. Robert, her father, was grilling fish on the porch. Her mother was setting the table, smiling gently. The Angela in the dream ran to hug her mother, whispering, "I'm sorry." She woke with
There
a
was
start.
no smell of grilled
Sitting
fish,
in a cramped
no sound
rented
of
room,
the ocean waves,
the street lights
only
filtering
a
through
biting
torn
cold
curtains that seeped into her bones. Angela understood. She had lost everything. Angela walked out of the airport with a small suitcase and dark circles under her eyes. The American sky was gray, as if it understood her shame. 6 months ago, she had left with a self-satisfied laugh, thinking she was stepping into a new life. 6 months later, she returned empty-handed, in debt, with a shattered heart. Edward was gone. The dreams of a restaurant in Paris had vanished like soap bubbles. All that was left were collection letters from the bank, nights sleeping on strangers' couches, and a cold emptiness where her family should have been. Angela dragged her suitcase out of the terminal and hailed a taxi. The first address that came to her mind was not a hotel nor a friend's house, but her mother's house. When the taxi stopped in front of the gate, Angela hesitated. The familiar house was still there,
Goodbye, Mom.
peaceful, its windows glowing with a warm yellow light. The scent of lavender from the garden wafted out. It was all like a still painting, unaware that the daughter who had betrayed it was standing outside. Angela gripped the handle of her suitcase, her heart trembling like a child returning home after skipping school. She rang the doorbell. The ding-dong echoed into the darkness. A moment later, the door opened. Her mother appeared, her hair grayer than before, her frame thinner, but her eyes were still gentle. Angela wanted to run and hug her, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, broken. Eleanor looked at her daughter for a few seconds. A small flame flickered in her eyes. Not quite anger, not quite forgiveness.
Angela bit her lip.
She just opened the door wider.
Her heart
"Come in,
pounded.
Angela. It's getting
The faint
cold."
smell of black tea, the ticking of the clock. It all made her feel both comforted and choked up. The two of them sat in the kitchen at the familiar old wooden table. Eleanor poured tea, placing a cup in front of her daughter. Angela's hands trembled as she picked it up, but she didn't drink. "Mom, I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I was wrong. I was foolish. I abandoned you, sold everything without a thought for your feelings. I thought I was smart, but I was just a blind fool chasing after a con man." Angela's tears fell onto the table, soaking into the dark wood grain. "Edward left me. He took all the money and left me with the debt. I have nothing left. No money, no home, not even my self-respect." Eleanor listened silently, her hands clasped together. When Angela stopped, choked with sobs,
"I was hurt
she
because
spoke
you treated
slowly.
me like a burden,
You
like
hurt
an extra
me,
in
Angela.
your life. Not because of
Do
the
you
money.
understand that feeling?
I've lost more than that before."
Angela bowed her head. "I understand now. When Edward left me, I knew how you must have felt when I said goodbye. I don't deserve your forgiveness." Eleanor said no more. She just stood up, got a set of blankets and pillows, and made Angela's old bed. The room was the same, faded wallpaper, a tilted round mirror, a few old books. Angela walked in, her heart in turmoil. "Get some sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow," her mother said, then gently closed the door. Angela lay down, and the tears came again. The bed that had once been the place of her youthful dreams was now a refuge after life had beaten her down. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the room, she felt safer than anywhere in Paris. For the first time in months, Angela fell asleep.
The sound of
without
dishes
the fear
clinking
of
came from
being
the
thrown
kitchen.
out.
She went out and saw
Angela
her
woke
mother
up to
frying
sunlight
eggs and making
streaming through
coffee.
the curtains.
The scene was so familiar, it made her heart ache. "Mom? Let me do it." Angela hesitantly approached. "Sit down. Have breakfast. You'll need your strength to face what's coming." Her mother's voice was firm, but not cold. During the meal, Angela told her more. About the night sleeping in train stations, about seeing Edward with another woman, about the mounting debts. She confessed that she had wanted to call her mother, but hadn't dared, out of shame, out of fear of rejection. Eleanor listened, nodding occasionally. Finally, she said, "You've hit rock bottom, Angela, and that might be a good thing. Because when you hit rock bottom, you can see the light above. The question is, are you ready to climb back up?" Angela looked up at her mother, her eyes red. Angela "I want
opened
to,
it, her face turning
but I don't know
pale.
where to start."
Bank documents, debt
That afternoon,
notifications,
a thick
a
envelope
long string of
arrived.
numbers, clearly signed. "Mom, they're going to collect.
I can't escape this." Eleanor placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Consequences are something you can't avoid, but you can learn to face them. I will help you, but not in the way you think." Angela was bewildered. Eleanor didn't explain further, only said, "Tomorrow, we're going to see Mr. Peterson." The name stunned Angela. She vaguely remembered him as her father's lawyer, but she had no idea that Peterson and her mother had been quietly making arrangements for a long time. That night, it was late. Angela sat by the window, watching the pale yellow streetlights. Her mother sat beside her, silent for a long time before speaking. "Angela, do you know why your father never boasted about money? He wanted you to learn to appreciate love, hard work, he believed and trust that money is just but you chose to trust someone not who only knew how to take your money." Angela burst into tears. "I know now. Mom, I'm truly sorry." Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "Regret is the first step. But if you stop there, it's meaningless. You have to change. You have to stand up from where you fell. And this time, I will be here. Not to carry your burden, but to teach you." Angela buried her head in her mother's shoulder, feeling for the first time in years the warm embrace she had abandoned. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but at least, in the familiar kitchen, with a hot cup of tea, she knew she was no longer alone. That morning, the sky was overcast, the clouds heavy as if about to burst with rain. Angela sat in the back of an old taxi, her hands clutching her purse, her heart The air pounding. In the car was thick, with only the steady swish of the windshield wipers. Her gaze Angela wanted to ask her mother, "Why are you taking me to a lawyer? What's the use when I'm drowning in debt?" But every time she was about to speak, she was met with Eleanor's firm silence, like a wall, as if her mother knew something she was never allowed to touch. When the taxi stopped in front of the old brick building, Angela looked up at the brass sign, "Peterson and Coes, Attorneys at Law." A chill ran down her spine. Peterson's office was spacious with dark wood paneling, the smell of leather chairs mingling with the aroma of coffee. Mr. Peterson, with his neatly combed silver hair, stood up to greet them with a professional smile. "Mrs. Brooks, and this must be Miss Angela." Angela nodded, a little flustered. "Yes, I'm Robert's daughter." Peterson then he turned to her mother. Seconds, his eyes "Are you ready to tell her?" And containing something Angela frowned. To "Tell me what? Judgment. Mom, what's going on?" Eleanor said calmly, "Sit down, Angela. You'll understand." Peterson opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file tied with a red string. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward Angela. "This is your father's legacy." Angela was stunned. "Legacy? But my father was just a bus driver his whole life. He had nothing but the beach house, which I've now." Her voice trailed off. Peterson interrupted in a calm but firm tone. "Robert was not just a driver. He was a silent investor. For 40 years, he bought real estate, stocks, and set up investment funds. He did everything under a private company to protect his wife and child. And Mrs. Eleanor is the sole heir." Angela's eyes widened. Her heart pounded. She tremblingly opened the file. Inside
She
were
read
copies of
the
deeds
words
to 6
dancing before her
properties,
eyes,
savings books,
a 20-story
and share
apartment building
certificates for
downtown,
3 large
the
companies.
very place she and Edward had lived,
A luxury apartment near the river, a small seaside hotel, and much more, plus a bank balance that left Angela reeling. The room fell silent. Angela looked up, her eyes wide, at her mother. What does this mean, Mom? You're rich? From the very beginning? Then what about... She choked, remembering the fateful call in the hospital waiting room. Her own cold words. Mom, I've sold the house and your car. I need the money. Goodbye, Mom. Finally, Eleanor spoke slowly. You thought I was penniless. You thought all I had left was the beach house and the old car. You believed you could cut everything off with just one phone call. But the truth is, you never knew your father, and you never knew me. Angela burst
Mom?
into tears.
Why didn't you tell
Hot
me?
tears rolled down
Why
her
did you let
cheeks,
me?
falling onto the
Eleanor
property
looked
deed.
directly
into her daughter's eyes, her voice even, but with both steel and love. Because if you had known, you would never have learned this lesson. Your father hid his legacy not out of a lack of trust, but because he wanted your love for your parents to be pure, untainted by money. But you chose Edward, you chose money, and you had to pay the price. Angela sobbed. So, you knew everything when I left? Yes, Eleanor nodded. I knew you had illegally sold the beach house. I knew you threw away the car your father cherished his whole life. I knew you thought I had nothing left but memories. And I remained silent. I let you fall, so you could see the abyss for yourself. Peterson interjected, his voice low. You must understand, Angela. Your mother has the legal power to undo everything you
Angela
did.
buried her face in her hands,
But she
her
chose
whole
to
body
wait.
shaking.
For you to learn what money can
I don't know
never
what to
teach.
say.
I feel so terrible. I betrayed you, betrayed my father. And yet you still... Eleanor placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her hand trembling but firm. I still love you. That love never went away. But now you have to answer a question, Angela. What do you want? Do you want to continue to rely on me? To have me fix all your mistakes? Or do you want to stand up, start over, and be worthy of what your father left you? Angela looked up, her eyes tearful, but with a spark of light. I want to start over. Mom, please give me a chance. Eleanor nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Then we'll start from here. But remember, Angela, I'm not saving you. You have to save yourself. I'm just opening the way. Peterson gently closed the file, his voice echoing in the dark, wood-paneled room. But you also have the chance
Your
to
family's
gain
story
much
is not
more.
over.
If
This
you
is
learn
just
to
the beginning
appreciate and change.
Miss
Angela, you have lost almost everything.
Angela
nodded, tears streaming down her face. A heavy sense of shame weighed on her, but beneath it, a small flame was igniting. For the first time, she was no longer just a selfish daughter. For the first time, she clearly saw the image of her father and the silent love of her mother. And she knew this was the decisive moment. Angela had been in free fall. But perhaps, from the bottom of the abyss, she was just beginning to learn how to fly. That afternoon, Peterson gave Angela another file, thick and heavy as if a whole building was weighing down on her shoulders. These are all the debts Edward left in your name, he said, his voice even, but his gaze stern.
Angela opened it, her hands trembling. The numbers appeared coldly. $105,000 in bank loans, a few more personal loans,
Angela's
not
voice
to mention
choked.
credit card bills
I
overflowing
never
with
signed.
interest.
I had
Each
no
page
idea
felt
he
like
used
a
my name
knife
like that.
twisting in her heart.
Peterson nodded. We have evidence that Edward forged the signatures, but the law is not swift. To prove your innocence, it will take time, money, and patience. In the meantime, the banks will still demand payment. They will still send legal notices. Angela felt weak. So, I'll be taken to court? They'll seize everything? Peterson looked her straight in the eye. If you don't act now, yes. But there is a way out, starting with your own change. On the way home, Angela was silent. In her mind, she could hear the rustling of papers, the rhythmic tapping of Peterson's pen on the desk. The whole world felt like a verdict waiting to be delivered. When they got home, Eleanor made tea and placed a cup in front of her daughter. You won't be alone, but there is one condition. Angela looked up, her eyes desperate. Not Any
to get out of
condition,
it,
Mom.
to face it.
As long as
You
I
will
can
work.
get out of debt.
You will pay it back with your own labor.
Eleanor shook her head.
I can protect you from immediate collapse, but you have to learn to take responsibility. Do you agree? Angela was silent for a long time. Then she nodded, her eyes welling up. I agree. Just please, don't leave me. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. I never left you, Angela. You left me. The next morning, Angela wore an old blouse and faded jeans. She walked downtown, a resume in her hand. For the first time in her life, she felt small in the city she once thought she had in the palm of her hand. She went into a corner cafe. The manager, a middle-aged woman, looked at her resume and then at her. Where have you worked before? Angela was speechless. Her whole life she had relied on her parents, then Edward. Her resume was almost blank. The manager sighed. We need someone who
Angela
knows how to
bowed
make
her
drinks,
head and walked out,
how to wait tables.
her heart as heavy
If you've
as a
never
stone.
done it, it's difficult.
All that day, she
Sorry.
knocked on 5 doors, a grocery store, a small restaurant, a clothing shop, a laundromat. The answer was always the same. We need someone with experience, or, sorry, we're not hiring. In the afternoon, she slumped onto a park bench, watching the people pass by. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to have no value in the eyes of others. A tear fell, then 2, then 3. Angela cried like a child left behind at a train station. When she got home, Eleanor was waiting in the kitchen. She didn't ask right away, just looked at her rain-soaked and weary daughter. Angela buried her head in her mother's shoulder, sobbing, They don't want me, Mom. I have nothing. I'm just a failure. Eleanor gently stroked her tangled hair. No one wants a failure, but everyone needs someone who knows how to get Tomorrow,
back up.
try again.
You won't find a job in
The
one
next day, Angela
But if
went to
you're
a small
patient,
office that specialized in
chance.
night cleaning. The manager, Mrs. Johnson, a woman with a tan and a sturdy build, looked at her resume and shrugged. No experience. You can do manual labor. We need someone to mop floors, take out the trash. Minimum wage. You in? Angela hesitated. This was a job she had never imagined, but the image of the debt file flashed in her mind. She nodded firmly. I'm in. Mrs. Johnson squinted. First shift is tomorrow night. Bring gloves, sturdy shoes, be on time, and you'll do fine. Angela left the office, feeling both ashamed and relieved. She had a job, a menial job, but it was a start. That evening, Eleanor cooked a simple dinner. When they finished eating, she looked at her daughter. "Angela, you've taken the most important step, accepting a start from zero. Your father used to say, it will teach you what money never doesn't know how to mop a floor.
Angela
doesn't
nodded,
know how to
her
keep a
eyes
house.
red.
I'll try,
Don't
Mom.
look
down on this job. I won't run away anymore." Eleanor smiled and poured more tea. A small spark of hope ignited in her heart. Perhaps her daughter had truly begun to change. When Angela went to bed, her sleep was fitful. She dreamed she was mopping the floor of a large building, the overhead lights flickering, the sound of her shoes on the cold tiles. But in her dream, she no longer felt ashamed, only that her hands were stronger, her shoulders straighter. She woke up in the middle of the night and saw the light from her mother's room seeping under the door. Angela knew her mother was rereading her father's papers, quietly preparing every step to protect her. Regret washed over her. She whispered in the darkness, "Mom, I won't let you down again." A new chapter in Angela's life began, not with flights to Europe, not with wine or expensive clothes,
she felt she
but with a
truly had
broom,
chance to change.
a mop, and scratched
Angela
hands.
had fallen into a deep abyss. But now, step by step, she was learning to climb back up, not by being pulled by someone, but with her own trembling but determined feet. Angela wore a pale blue uniform, the new rubber gloves making her hands sweat. As she entered the empty office building, the cold neon lights shone on the wet tile floor. The manager, Mrs. Johnson, with her tanned face and sturdy build, handed her a mop and a bucket of water. "Mop the entire third-floor hallway. Clean conference room A and the women's restroom. Stop when it's break time. No more, no less." Angela nodded, her heart racing. This wasn't a fancy party in Paris, not a candlelit hotel room, but the work of mopping floors, collecting trash, picking up every scrap of paper.
There was a sense of
But
peace.
strangely,
At least she was doing
didn't
something
feel the
concrete,
humiliation
useful,
she had imagined.
instead of waiting for debt collectors. In the small break room, Angela met two of her colleagues. Maria, from Mexico, small but agile, and Carol, a black woman in her 50s with warm eyes. Maria smiled. "Welcome to the team. Don't worry, we were all clumsy on our first day." Carol added, "The important thing is patience. No job is shameful if you do it with kindness." Angela sat and listened, a lump forming in her throat. Those simple words resonated more deeply than any of the grand speeches Edward had ever made about investment opportunities. The mop glided across the floor, leaving a shiny, wet trail. Every time Angela bent down to scrub, her back ached and her hands stung. But when she looked up at the sparkling clean floor, her reflection in the mirror, she felt something in her luxury apartment. She and Edward had complained when the cleaning people in the past noise. She had looked down on janitors. She was in their position, and she understood that every clean surface was earned with someone's sweat. In the mirror, Angela saw a different face, tired, but more real, unadorned. During their break, they sat on plastic chairs, eating sandwiches and drinking water. Maria talked about her 10-year-old son, who was studying hard to become a doctor. Carol spoke of paying off a loan to buy a small house for her granddaughter. Angela listened in silence, then blurted out, Do you ever get tired of this job? Carol laughed, her voice warm and deep. Tired, yes, but tired doesn't mean meaningless. This exhaustion feeds my grandchild, helps me pay my debts. That's enough. Angela bit her lip. That answer echoed in her head for the rest of her shift.
She looked up and saw her daughter.
When she got home,
stained with sweat.
Eleanor was still
face
sitting
flushed.
under the yellow lamp.
"How was your
reading
first
a
day?"
book.
she asked. Angela sat down, exhausted, but with a faint smile on her lips. "Harder than I thought. But I did it. And I feel less useless." Eleanor silently placed her hand on her daughter's, squeezing it gently. "You are learning the biggest lesson. Value doesn't come from status, but from being honest with the work you do." As the weeks passed, Angela gradually got used to the rhythm of night cleaning. She learned to mop faster without leaving streaks. She knew how to sort trash, how to handle chemical smells so they weren't overwhelming. And more importantly, she learned to listen to her colleagues' stories, to feel their simple worries and hopes. Every hard-earned dollar she saved carefully. No more splurging on handbags or makeup. Money was
One
now
night,
sweat,
as Angela was
sleepless
mopping the
nights.
hallway,
And
an
because
office
of
worker
that,
who was working late
it was
came
heavier,
out. He
more
glanced at her
precious.
and nodded. "Thank you. Because of you, we have a clean place to work tomorrow." Angela stood frozen, the mop in her hand. A simple thank you, but it warmed her heart. For the first time after so many failures, she felt useful to someone else. One day, Carol sat with Angela after their shift, looking at her as if seeing herself many years ago. "Angela, you know, this job doesn't define you, but how you do it will." Angela asked. "What do you mean?" "Some people mop floors and see it as a humiliation. Some people mop floors and see it as a lesson. You're at a crossroads. Choose." Angela sat in silence, but in her heart, she knew she had already chosen. Returning home, Angela placed her old work shoes by the door and saw her mother making tea. "Mom," I realized, "this job has given me something Paris never
I have
did.
value again."
I'm respected."
Eleanor
Not for
looked at her
my
daughter,
money,
her
but for
smile
my
tinged
effort.
with tears. "That's what your father always wanted you to understand." That night, Angela sat by the window, watching the moonlight reflect on the floor. She felt a strange sense of peace. No more illusions of quick wealth, only a small but firm belief. She was changing, and from that change, a new person was slowly taking shape. Angela had gotten used to the night cleaning job. She was no longer ashamed to wear the faded blue uniform, but felt proud that every dollar she earned was from her own hard work. But one evening, while tidying up some old paper boxes in her bedroom, she unexpectedly found a small envelope tucked inside a family album. The familiar, neat handwriting. Eleanor. Angela She remembered.
tremblingly brought it to her mother.
Robert had given this envelope to
Eleanor
Angela
took
with
it,
some papers
her
after the
eyes
funeral,
wide with shock.
but in the chaos of that time, it had been misplaced. Inside, there was only a short letter and a small steel key. The letter read, "Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means you have opened the first envelope and our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens box number 247 at the central bank. Inside is something that will help you help her, but use it only when absolutely necessary. With eternal love, Robert." Eleanor was speechless. Angela stared at the key, her heart pounding. Dad? Left you another secret? The next morning, Eleanor and Angela went to the central bank branch. The building was majestic, with gleaming glass doors and strict security. A receptionist led them down to the basement, where safe deposit boxes lined the walls, their heavy steel doors looking like something
What
out
else
of a
had her
spy
father
movie.
hidden?
Angela,
The manager
clutched
opened
the
a
key,
ledger,
feeling
checked their
a
documents,
mix of excitement,
and then led them
and
to
fear.
box number 247.
Eleanor inserted the key, her hand trembling as she turned it. The box door sprang open with a dry click. Inside was not cash or gold bars, but a polished wooden box. Eleanor opened it. A collection of antique jewelry, an emerald necklace, a diamond ring, a gold bracelet. Angela was astonished. Oh my God, this is worth at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that wasn't all. Underneath the velvet lining was a stack of documents, handwritten letters, old photographs, and investment ledgers. A photo fell out. Robert holding a baby Angela, with Eleanor smiling beside them. A note on the back. The day we bought the beach house, the dream begins. Angela held the photo, tears streaming down her face. In the middle of the
Eleanor
stack
opened
of
it and
papers
read
was
aloud,
a long
her
letter,
voice trembling.
clearly addressed.
If the two of you are reading
For
this
Eleanor
letter,
and Angela,
it means Angela has lost her way and needs to find herself again. My dear daughter, I did not leave you treasures to live a life of luxury, but for you to learn that true value is not in money, but in love and dignity. Your mother will know when to give this to you. But remember, this is not to pay off your debts, nor is it for you to start over as an innocent. This is for you to prove that you have understood the value of labor, and only then use it to build something better. Angela, I believe you will change. And Eleanor, thank you for continuing to teach her for me when I am gone. Angela buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Eleanor held her daughter's hand tightly, tears streaming down her own face. That evening, they laid everything out on the living room table. The necklace, the ring, I can
the
wipe the
certificates.
slate clean.
Angela
Over.
trembled.
Mom,
Eleanor looked at
with
her daughter.
this I can pay
her
off
voice
my debts
stern.
right away.
Are you sure that's what your father wanted? He wrote clearly, this is not to pay off debts, but to rebuild. If you use it all for the bank, you will be penniless again, and you will not have learned your lesson. Angela was stunned. In her mind, she saw the images of knights mopping floors, of her colleagues talking about their children, of the few dollars she cherished. She began to understand. Dad wanted me to use it to create a new future, not to patch up old mistakes. Eleanor nodded. Exactly. Angela tossed and turned that night, thinking about Edward, about the shattered dreams of Paris. She saw herself at a crossroads. One path led to a quick solution: sell the jewelry, pay off the debts. The other path was harder.
She
Keep
remembered
the wealth.
Carol's words.
Find a way to invest
Some
it
people
wisely
see mopping floors
and
as a
continue
humiliation.
to work to save herself.
Some see it as a lesson.
She whispered, I want to make it a lesson. The next morning, Angela walked into the kitchen, her eyes still red, but her voice firm. Mom, I'm not going to sell these things to pay off my debts. I'm going to keep working, saving, and when I'm strong enough, I'll use them to build something worthy. A project, a foundation, or something to help others from making the same mistakes I did. Eleanor looked at her daughter, seeing for the first time the light of maturity in her eyes. "Angela, you've truly grown up." The wooden box was placed back in the safe, locked tight. Angela no longer saw it as a treasure, but as a reminder that her father's true legacy was not in gold and silver, but in the lessons of dignity, love, and responsibility. That night, she knew Angela went to work. The future was not something given, her hand feeling but something to be built with her own hands. But her heart was light. And inside that safe deposit box, Robert was still watching, not to protect, but to witness his daughter taking her first steps on her own 2 feet. Winter arrived with biting winds, and in the mailbox in front of Eleanor's house, the thick envelopes with bank logos grew more numerous. Every time Angela checked the mail, her heart sank. On the kitchen table, each envelope was torn open, revealing glaring red numbers. Final warning, legal notice, risk of lawsuit. Angela read them, breaking out in a cold sweat. Many of the debts were in her name with Edward's forged signatures. The banks didn't want to know the truth. They just wanted their money. Eleanor watched her daughter, her eyes resolute. "You have to face it. No running away. If we have to, she was used to working, earning every penny. Angela nodded. These huge numbers hung over her head turmoil, like a guillotine. In the familiar dark wood-paneled office, Peterson laid out a series of files. "Mrs. Brooks, Angela, the situation has escalated. The banks have filed lawsuits. If we don't respond, they can freeze accounts, even seize some of Angela's assets." Angela said timidly, "But it's not my fault. Edward forged." Peterson nodded. "We have evidence of forgery, but it will take time for the court to accept it. In the meantime, the creditors won't sit still." Eleanor interjected, her voice firm. "Tell us straight, Peterson. What are our options?" "We have 2 options. 1, a legal counteroffensive to prove Angela's innocence, but it will take at least a few months, maybe even a few years. 2, negotiate with the banks, pay a portion, and defer the rest." A text from an unknown number. Both paths were fraught you're in with trouble. Difficulty. Don't be foolish that evening, and fight the banks. Angela's phone buzzed. "I can help if you need. We're still married. E." Angela was frozen. Edward, the man who had abandoned her in Paris, disappeared with another woman, was now resurfacing from the shadows. She tremblingly showed it to her mother. Eleanor glanced at it and sighed. "You see? When there's danger, he tries to pull you back in. But not because he loves you. He's afraid of being dragged into the light." Angela whispered, "Mom, I used to trust him. I betrayed you for him. Now, I don't know if I have the strength to face this." 2 weeks later, a court summons arrived. Angela had to appear to explain a $60,000 loan from the city's largest bank. The neighbors started to gossip. Aurora, the close neighbor, came over and whispered, "Eleanor, I heard the girl is being taken to court. Is it true?" Aurora looked at Angela with a mix of pity and suspicion. "But the truth will come out." Angela looked down. Angela is not a thief. Burning. The feeling of being judged by the whole world before the trial even began was suffocating. One morning, Peterson called urgently. "Angela, we've received a new document. Edward sent it from Paris, a letter admitting to forging your signature on some of the loans. But he wrote it vaguely, as if trying to bargain. Angela was stunned. The letter was scrawled. I, Edward Blake, have used Angela Brooks's name in some transactions, but she knew and agreed. I have proof. If you don't want everything to blow up, let's negotiate. Angela screamed, Lies! I never agreed. Peterson nodded, his face grim. Exactly. This is his tactic, to sow doubt. Half a confession, half an accusation. He wants us to be scared, to back down. Eleanor held her daughter's hand tightly. Don't tremble.
Angela lay in bed,
Your father prepared
listening
for
to
this.
the wind howl
We will
outside
not
her
be
window.
defeated.
In the darkness,
That night,
memories
it poured
flooded
rain.
back. Paris, the evenings with Edward raising glasses of wine, the promises to build a future. All of it now was just a knife twisting in her heart. She whispered, Dad, if you were still alive, what would I do? In her dream, she saw Robert sitting at the breakfast table reading the newspaper. He looked up and smiled. You have to stand tall, Angela. Don't let someone else's darkness bury your light. Angela woke up, tears streaming down her face, but with a new sense of determination. The next day, Eleanor sat opposite Peterson. Her voice was as low and steady as steel. Peterson, I want you to be prepared. Let Edward show his face. If he dares to appear in court, we will expose him. If he hides, even better. It's further proof of his guilt. But you must
Peterson
be prepared.
nodded. This trial will
I
be
will
brutal.
summon witnesses,
Eleanor
gather
turned
more
to her
evidence
daughter.
from the French banks.
Are you ready, Angela? Angela took a deep breath. I'm ready. I don't want to run away anymore. Outside, the press began to report on a transnational fraud case with the name Edward Blake appearing on the investigation list. Rumors spread quickly that he was hiding in Paris, that he was preparing to flee to another country, that he would retaliate by slandering Angela. In Eleanor's small house, the air was as thick as before a storm. Everyone knew that the upcoming trial was not just a legal battle, but a confrontation between a dark past and a new future. Angela looked in the mirror and saw herself. No longer the spoiled girl. No longer Edward's naive wife. Before her was a woman learning to step out of the darkness. She wore a simple black
On the
dress
day
her
of the
mother had
trial,
chosen.
the
Her
city
hair
sky
tied back
was as
neatly,
gray
her
as
face
Angela's
free of
mood.
makeup, only her eyes showing determination. Eleanor sat beside her, gently squeezing her daughter's hand. Remember, Angela, today is not just about defending you, but about getting justice for our entire family. They entered the courthouse. The cold stone steps, the heavy wooden doors. Inside, reporters and a few neighbors watched silently. News of the fraud case involving Edward had spread. The judge, a silver-haired man, banged his gavel. The court is now in session. The bank's lawyer stood up first, his voice sharp. The defendant, Miss Angela Brooks, is the signatory on multiple loans totaling over $100,000. We have signatures, documents, and verification. She must be held responsible. Angela bowed her head. Every word was like a twisting knife. Peterson stood up, his eyes sharp and
Edward
cold.
Blake,
Your
Miss
Honor,
Angela was not informed.
we have evidence that these
nor did she
signatures were
benefit.
forged by her husband.
She is the victim.
Mr., not the perpetrator. The bank's lawyer presented a thick file, projecting page after page with a clear Angela Brooks signature onto the screen. A murmur went through the courtroom. Angela trembled, looking at the signature that looked exactly like her own. Peterson remained calm. He took out a handwriting analysis report from an independent expert. This is a comparative analysis. Although the signature looks similar, the slant, pen pressure, and final stroke are distinctly different. The conclusion: a sophisticated forgery. The judge nodded. Enter the evidence into the record. The bank's lawyer frowned, but he wasn't done. He continued, "We have a letter from Edward Blake sent from Paris, confirming that his wife knew and agreed." A copy of the letter was presented. The courtroom buzzed again. I called to the stand, turned pale.
Mrs. Claire Dubois,
Peterson
a bank
smiled
employee
faintly.
from Paris.
Your Honor, we
A
were prepared
middle-aged
for
woman
this.
with brown hair and a firm demeanor walked in. She testified, "Edward Blake came to open an account at our branch. He boasted that he had outsmarted his wife, that she knew nothing. I recorded a portion of our conversation for an internal report, as I suspected fraud." Peterson played the recording. Edward's voice filled the room. "Angela will never know. My signature is identical. The banks in the U.S. only care about the numbers. She thinks I'm investing, but I'm really just cycling debt." A wave of whispers went through the room. Angela buried her face in her hands and cried. The judge banged his gavel. "Order." The bank's lawyer's face was pale, but he tried to salvage his case. But
Peterson
Mr.
said
Edward is
slowly,
not here to be cross-examined.
"We also have an official
His letter
notification from
still
the French
holds
police.
value. Edward Blake is currently in custody for fraud and marriage fraud. He is about to be extradited. The court can request international cooperation to obtain his official testimony." Angela looked up. For the first time in months, she saw a light at the end of the tunnel. It was her turn to speak. Angela took the stand. Her voice trembled, but was clear. "I used to trust Edward. I let him handle the paperwork. I signed what he gave me, because I thought it was just a family matter. When my father passed away, I was lost and relied completely on him. I betrayed my mother. I disrespected her to chase after his empty promises. But I never agreed to take on these debts. I had no idea my signature was being forged. I stand here not just to clear my name," she paused, "but to atone for my mistakes toward my mother, the only person who never abandoned me, even when I had abandoned her." The courtroom was silent. A few of the neighbors wiped away tears. The judge leaned back, deep in thought. The evidence and testimony strongly suggest that the defendant, Angela Brooks, is a victim of fraud. We will suspend the seizure of assets until we have the official testimony of Edward Blake from France. The next hearing will be scheduled after we receive the international file. The gavel fell. Angela let out a breath of relief, as if a tight band around her head had finally been loosened. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Peterson skillfully guided the two women to their car. Eleanor hugged her daughter and whispered, "You did it. You stood tall." Angela's eyes welled up. 3 months after the first hearing, news of Edward's extradition from France to the U.S. was all over the papers. His face was plastered on tabloids with sensational headlines. The two-faced man, from businessman to con artist. Angela looked at the picture, a mix of bitterness and relief in her heart. She no longer trembled at the sight of him. Instead, she felt as if an old chapter was about to close. Eleanor put the newspaper down on the table, her voice calm. Tomorrow, it will all be over. Are you ready? Angela nodded. Mom, this time I want to face it, not run away. The courtroom was packed. The media jostled for position, cameras flashing. Edward was led in, wearing a bright orange prison jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. But he still held his head high, a smirk on his face when he saw Angela. He whispered as he passed, "You'll never make it without me." Angela just looked straight ahead, his gavel, not responding. The trial of Edward Blake and Angela Brooks he was continued. Just a distorted shadow. Edward's lawyer tried his old tactic. Your Honor, my client maintains that his wife knew and consented. All evidence is just a misunderstanding. Edward nodded, a cunning look in his eyes. He turned to Angela, as if wanting her to break down one more time. But Peterson stood up, his voice booming. We have bank statements from France proving that Edward Blake conducted all transactions alone, withdrew all the money alone. We have a recording of him admitting to forging the signature. And most importantly, we have a confession letter he sent to a lover in Paris, in which he clearly wrote, Angela is so naive, I can use her name forever without fear of being caught. A murmur erupted in the courtroom. Edward was startled, her voice calm, his face powerful, changing color. Edward, the judge allowed Angela to speak. You deceived my mother. You deceived the future I once believed in. But what you can never take away is the dignity I am reclaiming. You thought I would always be weak. You were wrong. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I stand here to make it clear. I choose to forgive, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and it certainly does not mean excusing your crimes. I forgive to free myself, not to save you. Edward's jaw dropped, but he couldn't say anything. The condescending smirk vanished. After hours of deliberation, the judge banged his gavel, his voice firm. The court finds Angela Brooks not guilty. All debts incurred by Edward Blake are his sole responsibility. Edward Blake is sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and financial deceit. The stolen assets will be seized for restitution. Angela burst into tears, fell, but they were tears extinguishing the ghost that had haunted Eleanor Angela hugged her daughter for so many months. It's over, my love. We're free. A few weeks later, the Brookses' house was no longer filled with bank envelopes or court summons. Angela continued her part-time job, but now she worked with pride, not desperation. One evening, she sat with her mother on the porch, drinking hot tea. The sunset painted the clouds red. Mom, Angela said softly, I want to use what Dad left to start a foundation to help women who have been deceived and abandoned, just like I was. They need a chance to start over, to know that failure is not the end. Eleanor looked at her daughter, her eyes welling up. Robert would be so proud of you, and I am too. One night, Angela placed an envelope in front of her mother. Mom, this is all the money I've saved from my job. Eleanor opened it. I want to contribute to the household expenses. Neatly folded. I can't let you carry the burden tears forever. Rolling down her face. It's not the amount that matters, but the heart. You've truly grown up. Angela said timidly, Mom, do you forgive me for everything I've done? Eleanor hugged her, her voice choked with emotion. I never stopped loving you. Forgiveness doesn't need to be asked for, because I forgave you even before you came back. On the weekend, They returned to the beach house, the one Angela had sold, now back with the family. The small house stood silently by the shore, the salty sea breeze blowing through their hair. Angela walked along the porch, her hand gently touching each door, each old wooden chair. She felt as if she had returned to her childhood, when Robert would sit reading the newspaper and Eleanor would be cooking in the kitchen. Dad used to say,
"Mom,
a house
I want to
only
turn this
becomes a
place
home
into a shelter
when it opens
for
its
women
doors
who
to
need a new
those who
start."
need it. I want to make his words a reality. Eleanor nodded. Then let's start here. That night, the two women sat on the porch, looking out at the vast ocean. The waves crashed rhythmically, like the giant heartbeat of the world. Angela rested her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered softly, "Mom, I lost a lot, but I think I finally found the most precious thing, you and my true self." Eleanor stroked her daughter's hair, her eyes looking up at the starry sky. In her heart, she seemed to hear Robert's voice echoing, "You did it. She understands now. Love doesn't disappear, it just transforms into the strength to stand up." And in that moment, they both knew that the painful past was closed. Before them was a new
My dear
path,
friend,
built with
if
love,
you are still here,
forgiveness,
it
and
means you
dignity
have journeyed with me
reclaimed
all
from
this
the mud
way.
of betrayal, listening to the story of Eleanor and Angela, two women who went through a storm to find love, dignity, and justice. Close your eyes for a moment. The sound of the ocean waves, the gentle breeze through the old porch, and the soft light from the stars. It's all as if whispering in your ear. No matter how stormy life gets, there will always be a peaceful shore to return to. Angela found herself after losing everything. Eleanor proved that a mother's love can be stronger than betrayal, and you, the one who is listening, also carry that strength within you. You may have stumbled, you may have been heartbroken, you may have felt lonely, but remember, as long as there is a place to return to, a little bit of faith in yourself, it is never too late to start over. Now, let your eyes
Let this story be a
warm blanket. Let your heart
wrapping
rate
you
slow
in
down,
a peaceful
sleep, like the gentle
Thank you
waves
for
on a
journeying
distant
with me to
shore.
the
very end of the story. I wish you a peaceful night, a sweet dream, and when you wake up, you will find yourself a little stronger, a little gentler, and a lot more at peace. Sleep well.